80s. I was in high school. Would have been 16, 15, something like that. And on one of my infrequent trips to the game store, it wasn't until I turned 16 and I got my own driver's license that I could go on a regular basis. And I went on a regular basis. I went literally every week. Every payday or the day after, I went to the game store. I might have gone twice a week on a few occasions, especially in the summer. Sometimes just to hang out, sometimes just to browse to see what was there. But there was rarely a day I didn't walk out of that store, out of Ivor's Dungeon, without something in my hands. So, FASA at that time was coming out and introducing a number of different products. And they actually came out with several lines fairly short order from each other. And one of the earliest ones that they created, and this goes back probably a hair earlier than that, because some of the very original Star Trek role-playing game material, which I only have one or two samples of the very early stuff. Most of it altered and changed and came more up to speed. We've seen more glossy pictures, better paper content for material packaging. A lot of the things with the FASA products for Star Trek the role-playing game as well was that they came in sets. For example, you might get one individually, but then you might get a set. You'd buy a set like this. I'm not saying that these two went together, but I think this one went with the information briefing that I did a video on. But you would have two books packaged together in either a wrapper or a small box kind of setup. I've got one or two examples of that, and we'll get to those at time. But so as I video review them, I'll do them individually, of course. But anyhow, I was hugely into a number of different genres at the time. AD&D was the king. Was its Forgotten Realms, which was just coming around. I had a bit of the Greyhawk, which I think I gave it to a friend of mine some years ago, and because I don't have much, if anything, left of Greyhawk. I was collecting, the odds and ends, my space opera, my Judges Guild as filler. So if I went into the store with the intention to spend $50, which, at the time, for some of you young people, you're going to find, this is Grandpa talking, right? We made $3.35 an hour, because that was the the federal minimum wage. And I worked at Pizza Hut, I worked at Domino's, not much more money than that. I pumped gas at several gas stations. I worked for Peaster Derby and Coastal. I'm just saying that the irony that you'd get $150, $200, really getting a $200 check for a young man or a young woman in the early 80s was outstanding. So I get 100 and something, and I'd go spend half or a quarter of it at the game store. Of course, gas leak was $1 a gallon, which my father would have rolled over because he remembers the 20 cents a gallon stuff, and it's just the way it is, a generational thing. So I'd walk in and I'd buy one or two mainline products that was the latest release of whatever it was I was following. And then I'd go rifle through the shelves for other things that were taking my fancy. And if there was no major mainline stuff, I would pick up a couple, 2 or 3 of the secondary things that were on my radar at the time. So I started reviewing my Star Trek role-playing game collection, such that there is, and I discovered that my core rule books for the game itself are two of them are missing. One of them I got, I think, but couldn't be 100% sure it was part. And they come as a box set, and the box actually contained a number of items that didn't make it through the various years of handling and storage. When I was younger, I didn't take as much care with the peripheral stuff, all the little things, the little pieces, the chips and the maps and things like this that came along with the game systems at the time. And I did not take care of the boxes. I had no concept of what I might want to do with them 40 years down the road. I mean, here we are 40 years down the road in some cases, and lamenting the fact that my collections are far from complete. and that some of the ones that I kept and didn't keep, and I don't regret giving away stuff, but I do regret not having completed the sets in some cases, or taking better care of the method for storing them as they were intended. So Rob Gusterson was commenting that his experience with STR, the ST series, was somewhat limited and biased because he's not a huge Trekkie fan to start with, which is fine. Not everybody's a Trekkie. It's just like the occasional person I run into who says, "Oh, I don't ever watch Star Wars," and I just can't imagine that in my head. What the heck that would be? How can you live today and not have not seen a Star Wars movie? What are you from? Go back to whatever rock you came from. And the same thing goes with his experiences with the system were limited. And grant you, like I said, for young men and young women at the time, the game system was more cerebral. You really had to be a storyteller and into story-based stuff and we didn't have a concept for that. We have that today. Everybody argues: is it story-based? Is it mechanically based? Right? That's wasn't a thing at the time. But a lot of the adventures for Star Trek were often parody off of the TV series. And if you look at the TV series, a lot of it's it's meant to be thought-provoking or morally conflicting or high ideal. It's not high adventure. There's not as much high adventure. There's a few of those in there, but not quite on the scale of, say, Star Wars. And there's a lot of sci-fi RPGs and genres that are, and especially nowadays. But getting into it, so I went on to eBay and discovered basically a vintage version of the original box set that I purchased, and I think it's the same one that Rob's may or may not be familiar with based on his brief description of the cover of the box, right? And so I spent my coin and got it because it's actually an important piece of any game collection, because without the core rule books, you just got a bunch of reading material and fluff. Now I will point out that there are a couple occasions in a couple of my sets that I didn't buy the core book in the early days for a reason. I didn't want them. I didn't need them in my head. I could buy a number of different types of D&D style game systems and prefer to use the D&D rules because all my friends knew them, all my associates everybody I ran with and circles I ran with back then all were quite familiar with the D&D basic set or the AD&D rules and how they worked. It was just easier to superimpose those rules over top of whatever world's setting we used. And I did the same thing with my space opera. I used space opera's rules, which are deep and thick and clunky by today's standards, but very thorough, and used them to play Star Wars and to play Star Trek. So it wasn't necessary. But I did have the box set, I did have the rules, and I still have bits and pieces of it to remind myself. So then I did is, like I said, ordered it, and it came in a box. Now, I had, like always, I don't always pre-think my way through things, so my intention was just to get it, open the box and do a review on it. Then I remembered, hey, we can do a box reveal, right? So it comes in this nice package, somebody spent some money, and it looks all nice and stuff. And of course some crazy fat guy got in a hurry, as you see, and ripped open the top. So we'll get on to that. And the wife wants me to save the box because we're going to use it to pack a Christmas present in for somebody. So as you can see, got a nice box in a box. Now this is the Star Trek role-playing game, second edition, the Deluxe game. This is actually pretty much the version that I got. There's obviously a first version, and I think there's actually another first version that predates. So there was another box set, and there's a third box set to come after this, a third edition, although I don't have it And as you can see, the box for a used game, you can see a little bit. Whoever had it took really good care of it. Probably didn't play it all that much, but it works for us. Very nice. This will look really good on my shelves, and someday maybe find the opportunity to play it. So in this case, it came with some more. Looks like a set of D10s. Yeah. In the early days, the D10s would have been much cruder. And I have one or two of those laying around here somewhere. At least I did. Really cheap plastic. So by the time they got to the second edition, and that's assuming these actually came in the box. These look newer. These look more modern to me. These remind me of these things that were coming out in the later 80s or early 90s. So perhaps the owner just decided to throw those in. A little bit of packing material. So you can see this is how I remember it coming. And I have one of these, but I don't have the other two. And I'll have to dig around to see which. So we have is our Starfleet Officer's Manual. We have our Cadet's Orientation Sourcebook. And we have our Game Operations Manual. And I'm not going to review them at this moment. I will work my way through these individually, because that's how we should do this. So I'll set this right there. And then we have, I can feel there's a bit of a break in the box there, so we'll take care. But this is unusual. This particular set, this person may never played them. These are card counters or tokens for ship combat, and they have never been punctured out. They're all intact. So that's nice. That's interesting. And then these are the things when I talk about box sets. A lot of box sets will come with additional material that may or may not be crucial to the playing of the game, and these will be the things that will get misplaced or lost. This here is an extra for Starship Combat Game Rulebook 2003-A for dealing with some ship combat. Master Control Panel. This is a modified version of the type used in Starfleet battles, and I will be reviewing my Starfleet battles up the road at some point. Right there. Much more, actually this system is more refined, which makes sense. But if you look at what you got, master damage control, you got deflector shield, so you got several sheets of paper, keep track of all your stuff. Yeah, that's the fun thing about Starfleet combat in Star Trek, is that it is quite in-depth. More counters, weapons fired, sensors, fire tokens, no fire tokens. Like I said, very nice, very good shape. It looks new. Another set of ships. These are in pristine condition, very pristine. Wanting to pop out there. I'm gonna guess, like I said, the individual here never. Oh, now isn't that interesting? This actually has. I don't know if that came with it or not, but here's our combat map. So, does this look familiar to you, Rob? I'm just wondering. Yeah. Yeah, you could spend entire sessions in ship combat, and you could actually get, if you get a player or two who doesn't get into the role-playing game but gets hooked on tactical war games, whether they realize they're playing a war game or not. This stuff here is very good. Now this here threw me off, right? This is sold back in the day separate. Now perhaps because this is a deluxe box, they included it. I don't know if it came in the box. I don't know if there's a way to look through it, but this came out right after the Star Trek 4 came out, and sourcebook update, of course. And FASA was producing one of these, like Star Wars. Whenever a new book series that came out for Star Wars. They introduced a source book that kind of linked them together. In this case, in time the movies came out, they created a source book to bring together any new information or planets or updates to known stuff, in this case other races, and additional information on the existing ones, and updated bits of canon and so on and so forth. So this one have been the Voyage Home, and a bit more than that, I think, because this one looks like it got bits and pieces of not just a Voyage Home, but potentially parts of number 5 mixed in here. But bits of number 3 in here too, because there's information on the Genesis project, so they might have lumped a couple different things in. I actually have a version of this, and when I go to review it, I'll take this together and we'll look and see if this isn't an updated version. And then we got our Starship Tactical Combat Simulator. So in reality, this box set is 2 sets of games. You have your role-playing game set, and that's what those early. Put these in here. That's a core order form in there. There's your role-playing game. That's your core book, your player handbook, and so forth. That's what you need to play the Star Wars or Star Trek, the role-playing game. And if you want to play Starfleet Battles, their version of it, that's what this is. The Star Trek Starship Tactical Combat Simulator, or an updated version, or streamlined version of Starfleet Battles. I always like this stuff. This is beautiful. This is beautiful work here. I'll tell you that right now. So, looking interesting to. I am looking forward to reviewing, rereading the material for myself and reviewing it. This is Master Control Book. So this is the examples or pre-made. Yeah. So here it is. You have to excuse me because I've limited my table space, and my camera rig is at a slant, which causes me to have to keep adjusting things. Hopefully in another month we'll have a permanent house, and I'll have a nice large table to use, which I have in storage to do these things and spread out a little better. Federation Excelsior Mark 1, basic stats, and it's got all the information in here, see, so it's all set up so you can utilize it. This is, I don't know what an R1 is unless it's a space station. Okay, here's a Klingon D7M, and all of its pre-set up stats. So they've taken this basically as a collection of pre-generated starships for you to utilize in your tactical war game that you have. So there we have a very nice collection for Star Trek the role-playing game.